Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Rotoworld Football Podcast. My name is Josh Norris, joined here for this massive, important, vital Week 3 preview show by John Daigle, Hayden Winks, and I believe in the bottom left-hand corner, that is Patrick Doherty. Pat, we were saying this, in a little pre-show, our little green room chat here. There are very few people, at least in the football universe, that can pull off the transformation that you have from going from, let's say, hairy hermit with a beard and a mustache. That is just, it was outrageous and beautiful, I might add. But also to now, some might say you look like you're coming back from your child's baptism.
That is literally what John said before we started taping. And yeah, I'm in the workshopping looks phase of my life. I had the same look for about 25 years. I still prefer it off camera, to be frank, but I'm having a crisis of confidence. I'll just be honest on the camera. So I'm workshopping a different look. And again, to take people behind the curtain, shaving the mustache is officially a mistake. Like, we all learned that. We admit that as a group, actually. Even though it was me, we take group responsibility for that. It was a mistake. But people don't realize how much work. People don't realize how much work goes into that, so it can't be fixed overnight.
Bigger mistake. Drafting Matthew Stafford or that mustache shave, Pat? It's one of the two, right?
Hey, in my Superflex league, I'm all aboard the Hayden John Stafford hype train. Getting Kenny G back this weekend.
Pat,
it's a new week. It's a new week.
I comment on the look, and I want to say I'm very pro about it. Like, I'm very positive. I think this is the best one yet. It's just, it's like our own little Ryan Gosling here, or even a Christian Bale, someone who can like shift from role to role and really transform their look and their body. You have done that, Pat. Thank you for doing that. So, Hayden and I can continue to wear navy, and Daigle finally, loses the hoodie he's been wearing all year long.
This is just me hitting a wall in week 2. Is all it is. But now I'm losing clothes the more tired I get.
Okay. Well, it's a big show. Like I said, some gigantic totals this weekend, Hayden Winks, some impressive matchups that we have, the week 3 slate. And hopefully we have a little bit more of a grasp of what the actual NFL looks like now than we did in previous weeks. Let's start off with the Chicago Bears going to the Atlanta Falcons, 47.5 total in this one. Falcons at home, despite their 0-2 record, are favorites in this game by 3.5 points. Hayden, what has impressed you about this Bears offense being 2-0? Is Mitch Trubisky here to stay?
He might be. He's athletic enough to kind of keep the offense alive. I will have to note that Allen Robinson liked my tweet earlier this week, and that tweet wrote that only 47% of his targets were catchable by PFF, and that was definitely shade at Mitchell Trubisky. And I didn't even tag Allen Robinson. I'm not here to tag players. He found this tweet on his own and liked it. So we're definitely on Allen Robinson, his big mad alert. I still have him as a rebound candidate. I think that things are going to work out. He has wide receiver 14 fantasy usage. I'm not too concerned about Allen Robinson moving forward, honestly.
My stat for this game is, were it not for the Seahawks, the Falcons would be allowing 78 more passing yards per week through the first 2 weeks than any other team in the league. So, the Seahawks are just in a totally different stratosphere right now. But, the Falcons have just been absolutely gutted back-to-back weeks, and by much better quarterbacks than Mitchell Trubisky. But as we've seen Mitch have success against bad defenses. And yeah, Mitch, I don't want to admit this, but yeah, Mitch he's a streamer yet again this week.
It's odd. Like, this Bears team, I went back and watched that game, obviously, last weekend, and I thought the offense started off wonderfully. Now, I think it was aided by some turnovers on the other side of the ball, but I've been very impressed with this Bears offensive line, and they've given Mitch to have some uncertainty in his game, but then still create positive plays from it. Like that touchdown to Darnell Mooney on the left side, he held the ball for about 6 seconds. And then as we saw, there have a little bit more urgency in the Bears offense in the second half. We saw some turnovers there with Mitch Trubisky. Again, this is a small sample size. Don't want to take anything away. They're obviously playing some winnable football now, but I am fascinated to see if they can keep up with a Falcons offense who's putting up points, week in and week out, yards week in and week out. But Daigle, so far, obviously the Falcons aren't having a winning football formula.
Yeah, so on the Bears side, just the fact that David Montgomery has out-touched Tariq Cohen 38-15. Tariq Cohen not even being used properly after his big extension. They're trying to use him between the tackles, which is really odd considering they threw him in the slot last year. So David Montgomery is a winner so far through 2 weeks. And for the Falcons, it's still pretty easy, right? I know Julio Jones has been limited throughout the week with that hamstring injury that I think did actually scale him back and deter his performance against the Cowboys. But it's still Calvin Ridley easily, who is the wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy right now. Russell Gage surviving on 7.9 targets per game in his last 11 contests since the Falcons traded Mohamed Sanu to the Patriots dating back to last year, and Hayden Hurst still out there running routes. So for the Falcons, again, it remains just simple to get them out there.
The stat I am watching with the Falcons, though, is Russell Gage has out-targeted Hayden Hurst in each of the first 2 games. And, week 1, we kind of thought maybe that's what the imposing Seahawks tight end defense. And Hayden Hurst had a good game in week 2. I mean, he had like solid fantasy day. But yeah, it'll be hard for Hayden Hurst to make a tight end 1 living if like that's an actual trend and not just statistical noise from the first 2 weeks.
And final note on the Falcons, like no one is elevating their floor any less than what Todd Gurley has done so far this season. I mean, he has running back 11 usage according to Hayden's column that he puts out every week, but running back 36 overall production. I mean, what I see when I watch Todd Gurley is a 1-speed player who has failed to break a single tackle through 2 games so far and has just 3 touches inside of the 10-yard line, which is the exact same as Ito Smith. I'm certain like the Falcons are happy that it's just a 1-year deal here for Todd Gurley. And I believe they're missing Caleb McGarry and Jake Matthews is injured entering this contest. It's going to be through the air, I believe, if the Falcons are going to do it this week. And volume is king, obviously, but Todd Gurley is doing absolutely nothing with that volume.
For any other back, you would see 21 carries and be happy with it. But Todd Gurley, we are never happy with that. We want 12 carries and 8 targets, and that is his ceiling right there. But as you said, RB2, you still probably have to start him just for the touches.
All right, moving on to the Rams and the Buffalo Bills, one of Sunday's best matchups. 47.5 total in this one. The Bills are 2.5-point home favorites. Obviously, both teams are 2-0. Hayden, it's going to be a big picture question here, and not to paint you into a corner already, but which offense have you been more impressed by through 2 games?
Well, but they're taking different approaches here. I think on the Rams side, they're taking a very conservative approach. They're, I think, dead last in neutral pass rate. They're not even throwing the ball downfield very often either. So they're kind of setting up Jared Goff, who's a complete system quarterback, as a play action guy. And then on the other side, they're letting Josh Allen figure things out. They're using 4 receivers sometimes, 5 receivers sometimes, and they're really spreading the ball around. And they're also using play action at the 4th highest rate in the league. I think both of these offenses are awesome. This will be one of the best games of the week, and I am ready right now to take my L on Stephon Diggs. He has wide receiver 8 fantasy usage. He's commanding a 27% target share. I think that he's a locked-in upside wide receiver 2, even though that we have to be a little cautious that the Bills started the year against the Jets and the Dolphins.
And on Stephon Diggs, Pat, real quick, I mean, the difference, I think, in his ability and this Bills transition is something that I wrote about in the Bus column. It's Josh Allen being good, like one of the best already in 15-plus yard throws in the NFL so far this season. He's hit on 12 of 14 attempts, according to Rich Rebar, on those 15-plus yard throws. That's a completion percentage versus his prior 2 years of 53% difference. So, like, just adding that element, like, Pat, we've always known that Allen has this big, massive, velocity-filled arm, but he's adding, like, loft to it. He's adding touch onto it so far. And I'm sure there's going to be some regression there to, a league average rate. But thus far, that has really been a major factor in the benefit of the Bills.
Well, yeah, that is the story so far, is that he's really hitting those mid-range throws, but his average depth of target has actually come down, which would maybe be hard to guess from his stats since his YPA is way up, his completion percentage also way up, his percentage of off-target throws way down, all that from Mike Clay, who had just had a great tweet on it earlier this week. But yeah, they've kind of made him more aggressive in some ways, but less aggressive in like very important ways. And yeah, I mean, if we're taking L's, I mean, do I already have to take a Josh Allen L here? Like,
yes.
I've never seen it anywhere even close to one game like this from him, let alone 2 in a row. But Hayden did say, so obviously, I mean, I'm looking wrong on Josh Allen, but it was the Jets. It was the Dolphins. This is a very difficult test against the Rams defense that made life miserable. Maybe not miserable for Dak Prescott, but held Dak down in week 1, made life miserable for Carson Wentz in week 2. And if Josh Allen has even, just a nice game this weekend, like he's officially a different quarterback. They've officially figured out the formula for Josh Allen, just not just like wanton deep shots, and like just make him focus on that mid-range of the field where your arm strength is still a huge weapon. And yeah, I mean, taking advantage, Steph Diggs tied for the league and receiving yards so far. So the Bills, after 2 years of searching, seem to have finally found like the formula to put Josh Allen in a position to succeed.
It's a true test on the other side of the ball as well for Jared Goff, because as we know, when Jared Goff is both on the road and under pressure, it is a chance for us to avoid him. The thing is, with this offense running at all cylinders so far, he hasn't had a chance to be under pressure. He's only been under pressure on 18 dropbacks, and his completion rate on those 18 dropbacks has plummeted to 31%. Just like last year, his completion rate was 42% when under pressure. So will the Bills, who have been middle of the road in that territory, in particular in week 2 without 2 of their starting linebackers, be able to get pressure on him? And thus, what Rams offense will we see? That's one of the biggest question marks of week 3.
Hayden alluded to this earlier. I mean, Jared Goff has always been like kind of protected by play action with Sean Payton. It's been comical lengths this year. Like it's basically play action or nothing for Jared Goff. And as teams kind of start to make the adjustments against the Rams, it'll be interesting to see how Jared Goff weathers that. Because they were taking play action to like almost like unseen heights, the Rams, and spreading the ball around more than they're just doing a masterful job. But yeah, as the league kind of adjusts back to this, it'll be very interesting to see how Jared Goff adjusts.
Dago, I'm glad you mentioned those linebackers, because what Sean McVay did to the Eagles linebackers last week was brutal. I mean, he put them in a blender on each one of those rollouts, on each of those like manufactured touches in the red zone to Tyler Higbee. And I mean, the Bills have great ones. Hayden, you and I talked to Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott about Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds and, this defense and how they built it last year at the NFL Combine. And if they're healthy, it's good. But we know that Milano and Edmonds so far have been limited in practices. I mean, you have to be at full strength right now because Sean McVay is finding his way back into reinventing himself already as a play caller. They're changing things up game to game and series to series so well. And it's been a really, really fun offense to watch. And then you have multiple pieces, and Van Jefferson can come in, and, Dago, your guy, Darrell Henderson. And it seems like they're deeper than they have been, at least in last year.
And for this week, as it goes for Darrell Henderson, we are likely going to see a career high in touches since Malcolm Brown just had surgery on his finger and will still probably be available, but I would expect him to be limited, and Cam Akers likely out. So you still should have confidence in Darrell Henderson despite the tougher matchup this week.
For the people out there, Hayden, what's your confidence level in starting Darrell Henderson or a Malcolm Brown this week? Is it flex at the best for each?
Well, it really comes down to the injury report. And if both of them are out, then Darrell Henderson's an RB2. The Bills' run defense has not been as good as the pass defense has for a couple seasons now. So I think that Darrell Henderson would be an RB2 if both guys are out. If Malcolm Brown's in, then he's more of a flex guy. But I think that Darrell Henderson should probably be viewed as a top back this week.
Let's move on. Washington football team goes to the Cleveland Browns, who won last week, as we all know. Both teams are 1-1 at the moment. Cleveland is 7-point favorites, 44 total in this one. Pat, do we believe that Baker Mayfield, Kevin Stefanski, Odell Beckham, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and this offense is more like what we saw in week 2 against the Bengals, or more like we saw in week 1 against the Ravens?
I mean, we believe they can run over a defense that's missing Geno Atkins and Mike Daniels, both players who are no longer in their prime. But I mean, so that was the bare minimum that you need to see, though. If your offense is in an advantageous situation, you need to take care of it. You need to take advantage of good matchups. And, the Browns, a lot of times last year, couldn't even take advantage of good matchups. And they just ran over the Bengals on a short week. And as we know, there's a much stiffer test in this Washington football team, which I still can't laugh every time I say that. Just a much stiffer test for this running game. And I mean, Baker Mayfield, was much more confidence, much more poise. But yeah, the jury is still out, but that was an important step. I mean, just even taking advantage of a good matchup was not something you could take for granted with the Browns last year, and a much tougher matchup up front. I'll be very interested to see how Baker Mayfield handles the Washington front seven.
Daigle, what do you think?
Washington is also operating at the second fastest pace and neutral game script in the league. So if they can get pressure and keep this game competitive throughout, we will likely also see more plays for Cleveland. The one person I keep coming back to is Jarvis Landry, who only has 9 targets on the year after having proven rapport with Baker the last 2. So it's crazy to see that Odell Beckham is continuing to have a strong 28% target share on the season, but it's probably because this ball is now spread out in this offense between Austin Hooper, Kareem Hunt, Harrison Bryant even, and Nick Chubb. So with all involved, Landry is the one to seem who has lost out over the season and probably goes to a less confident wide receiver 3 as opposed to having that high floor weekly like he did last year.
Hayden, we saw last week that Washington leaned on Antonio Gibson a little bit more. They were chasing that game a little bit more than they did in week 1. Well, I guess they chased that game in week 1 against the Eagles too, but it was Antonio Gibson's debut. What I'm trying to say is he's still not getting feature back touches, but when he's getting them, he's doing some real damage with them. Again, this game has a 7-point spread. Do you think we might see Antonio Gibson see even more touches this week?
Antonio Gibson's role is increasing rapidly. Last week, he had 22 routes. The previous week, that was 8. Carries went from 9 to 14. And the big note here is he's kind of game script dependent for now. While Washington is trailing, he has a 24% touch share. I don't think he has a touch when they have a lead. And the other note is just Peyton Barber only played 1 snap last week. So I think that Antonio Gibson is quickly coming into the RB2-3 range, and the previous couple of weeks you didn't want to play him. I think that there could be a breakout game. He's definitely somebody you should be trying to buy if you can in season long.
You making the game script was different last week, like you said, but to me the takeaway wasn't so much Antonio Gibson's touches, but Peyton Barber's. Like Ron Rivera is basically, my bad, 1 touch from Peyton Barber. Like, we get it, 17 carries for 29 yards. We should have known that was going to happen, but now they're admitting the mistake and hopefully moving on.
We can't move on without talking about Logan Thomas either, because I know it's frustrating, but a 27% target share. Week 1, 24 slot snaps. In week 2, when they fall behind, they don't take them off the field. They just move them to the slot and give him 44 snaps and play him as a receiver in negative game script. He's only been asked to pass block 3 times. He's running routes when he's out there. So the usage is there. I know it's tough, but again, it's a tight end. It's a onesie position. So you just keep playing the guys with immense opportunity, and it is clear Logan Thomas has immense opportunity every single week.
Final thought on the Browns. I think we all went into week 1 anticipating that they were going to lose that game to the Ravens. The Ravens are stacked at basically every single layer of their team. Then we went to week 2 expecting them to beat the Bengals, which they did very, very easily, obviously. I think this is going to be more of a difficult test because obviously Washington has a real strength and it's in their defensive line. And if the Browns can handle that with, their reworked offensive line and how they continue to use the offense like they did last week against the Bengals, then I think this will be a telling test. We'll finally get a grasp on really what this Cleveland Browns team is. All right. Someone has some extra sound going on the stream, by the way. There's a little.
I'm vacuuming.
Do you hear that too, Pat?
I do hear it. It sounds like a street sweeper. Just assume that's John. It's Evan's Roomba.
Here, let me.
I just muted my mic, so I'm assuming it's not
it's
me.
Hayden's. We'll get that working. All right. Let's move on. The Tennessee Titans go to the Minnesota Vikings. Tennessee Titans, 2.5-point road favorites here, 47.5 total. We talked about the Vikings a lot exiting week 2 as one of the worst teams visually, not pleasing to the eye. But Pat, Tennessee, their formula continues to work. It continues to be exactly what they did last year, and they are 2-0 because of it.
Yeah, it didn't quite work in week 1 where Ryan Tannehill had 43 attempts, but then last week it was seriously like they just picked up where they left off and 4 touchdowns on 24 attempts. And that even as Derrick Henry still wasn't taking advantage of the carries and was still remaining a low yards per carry guy last weekend. Yeah, I mean, for Ryan Tannehill to have that performance without A.J. Brown, I mean, we know that it's just not possible every week to get 2 or 3 touchdowns when you're only attempting 20 to 25 passes. But I mean, seriously, if Ryan Tannehill can do that with A.J. Brown, maybe he's kind of like a regression model breaker, and just like he is just the perfect right place at the right time, basically the perfect player for the perfect offensive style. And I will be interested to see how this, because another week without A.J. Brown. So even in a good matchup, just a falling apart Vikings team, especially a falling apart Vikings defense, this projects as a game where where the Titans can do exactly what they want to do on offense. And when they can do that, it seems to produce QB 2 days for Ryan Tannehill, even on limited volume.
And what they want to do on offense is, of course, load it up for the big dog. The top 8 leaders in running back touches are all inside of the top 12 running backs this year, except for the one man who leads all running backs in touches, Derrick Henry, with 59. He is currently the RB25, and that's all because he has yet to score a touchdown. So this offense is still an odd one. I do agree that Ryan Tannehill is playing out of his mind and is uber efficient and is not regressing yet. But given the game script against this horrid Vikings team, you would have to imagine this is finally the game for Derrick Henry to join the ranks where he belongs.
Hey, go ahead.
The Vikings horrid is the word. I was just going to congratulate John on saying horrid, because it just just pathetic.
Hayden, what do you think? Because when I'm looking at this game, I see a team in the Minnesota Vikings that just lacks the ability, the talent to play from behind. Like, they are just not an offense that if they get behind by 10 points or 2 touchdowns, they don't have a second wide receiver. That's not when you use the running game. And that's not when Kirk Cousins is going to thrive. I mean, I'm actually looking at the time to throw according to Next Gen Stats. Kirk Cousins is holding the ball the 3rd longest in the NFL so far, just behind Lamar Jackson, just behind Baker Mayfield. And I mean, if I could guess why that reason, and it's because he just wants something to be perfect throwing the football to, and he just does not have that at the moment. But as Daigle mentioned, it's not just the Vikings offense that's the issue, it's their defense. And now going against the big dog in Derrick Henry, they're down Anthony Barr as well. This is just a formula where the Vikings are in major, major trouble.
The Vikings are lucky Coach Adam Gase hasn't been fired yet, because they are possibly the 2nd worst offense in the league right now. They ran 96 plays through 2 weeks. That's dead last. The 2nd worst is the Jets, up at 115. So they've ran 20 fewer plays than the 2nd worst team in the league. And we heard it from the offensive coordinator today. Gary Kubiak said he wants to run the ball more. This is despite the Vikings being 29th in neutral pass rate right now. This offense has basically no chance. Dalvin Cook doesn't look completely right. And I think the only saving grace is Adam Thielen, 33% target share. That's like one of the top 3 in the NFL. So when the Vikings do figure things out a little bit, you're going to see Adam Thielen have some crazy big weeks just because he's the only guy that's involved in the passing offense right now.
But the issue with that is Adam Thielen had like 2 glorious catches along the right sideline in that first quarter. And then he didn't have a catch, I believe, until the third quarter. And in fact, 2 of Kirk Cousins' throws to him were him just trying to force the ball to Adam Thielen. Like, he knows it's his only guy, but guess what? So does the defense. The defense knows it's there as well. This is just a poorly thought out and constructed team heading into the season. They thought they could do what the Titans are doing and do the exact same thing while you're without Kevin Stefanski doing it and you're without Stephon Diggs doing it. And those are 2 pivotal pieces in order for this team to fail this year. And that's exactly what they're doing. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm wrong.
I will say, just with Adam Thielen, the limited play volume thing is completely unsustainable. The Vikings are going to get better just by default. And Adam Thielen, his target share is not going to drop too much. And if you have a 33% target share, it is basically you're too big to fail. So I think Adam Thielen will end up working out as like a top 12-ish fantasy receiver. We just need the Vikings to play not as the worst team in the league, maybe like the 30th worst team in the league.
And Mike Zimmer came out Thursday and said he is going to get Justin Jefferson more involved. And just to be involved at all is getting him more involved. So if you want to get a jump on that for waiver wires as well as an early pickup, they have to go somewhere else. So of course it's going to be your talented rookie because they're not trying to go anywhere else right now.
So to get involved, he'll have to separate at all. So we'll see how that works.
The 2-0 Las Vegas Raiders go to the New England Patriots, with the Patriots 6.5-point favorites, a total of 47.5 here. I mean, Vegas 2-0, Daigle. How are they doing it? It's pretty clear how they're doing it. Josh Jacobs, Darren Waller, Henry Ruggs mixed in every once in a while. But don't you think like the offensive line has to play at a top flight all year long for that to be sustainable? Because I do.
I was going to say the Panthers and the Saints defenses. That's how they're doing it. But nevertheless, Josh Jacobs is getting every single touch. He hasn't practiced so far this week, which is odd considering he left Monday night for a few plays with a hampered leg, a soft tissue injury, I believe. But either way, it's interesting because they put in Devontae Booker in those reps, which tells us that Devontae Booker would be the handcuff if Jacobs is out for any amount of time for his bruising style of running. However, if they lose Josh Jacobs, like this offense crumbles to the ground most likely because it's still Darren Waller and at times Henry Ruggs, who's not being used as we thought he would in manufactured touches shallow. They are literally just throwing him out there and telling him to run deep, and they're letting it fly, hoping for a penalty. So hopefully for a floor, we do see more shallow targets for Ruggs moving forward.
I reject that a little bit. Because it's only been 2 games, and they did that in the first game. You know, they did that 3 or 4 times in week 1 in terms of manufactured touches behind the line of scrimmage or shallow crossers near the line of scrimmage, and then he got injured, you know, at the end of the second quarter. You know, so I bet that's still part of the game plan. I'm with you. I want them to do it more. I might have said it heading into preseason that he was going to lead this team in targets. That is now virtually impossible with Darren Waller getting 33 on Monday Night Football. But I bet they do. And I don't know what it was in week 2 because Bruggs, you're right, was not involved at all. And I bet part of it was what they were doing was working, running the football and getting the football to Darren Waller. But he was obviously coming off injury as well.
Yeah, Ruggs, the variable is the knee. And, you know, what the Raiders have done is kind of extra impressive because, I mean, Trenton Brown has been hurt. Richie Incognito barely played Monday. I mean, the Saints defense didn't play well. I mean, the Saints defense isn't supposed to be the kind of defense that a team like the Raiders can do whatever they want to against. And that is what happened Monday night. But going into this game against New England, so we know that every team wants to stop the other team's good players, but it seems like only the Patriots ever like truly design game plans to stop players. And we know Bill Belichick is going to be keyed in on Darren Waller and Josh Jacobs, and just both coming off, you know, kind of like the high profile week 2. I wouldn't be shocked if we see like a big Darren Waller letdown, especially since he's apparently hurt. And, you know, he's getting a ton of volume, but he's posting almost a running back-esque yards per catch. I mean, like these are like true catch and falls, basically. I mean, he's looking like a total beast in the process. I don't want to undersell Darren Waller, but we could see the Patriots sell it to stop Darren Waller. And yeah, it's very disappointing already to see Josh Jacobs nicked again. He played very well through injury last year, but just someone we would love to see stay healthy, like close to 100% healthy.
Hayden, everyone is glowing about Cam Newton's performances, and rightfully so, through 2 weeks. Yet typically when a quarterback is playing at this level, then other pieces are bigger factors. And that's not the case in New England. It's Julian Edelman, and then that's it. I mean, I know Cam obviously factors in the rushing scores as well, but isn't that kind of uncommon and almost rare for a team to have so much praise offensively, especially the quarterback position, and for us to not want the other pieces?
Well, this is what happens when you're a slow-paced team and a run-heavy team. Last week, we kind of saw the situation flip. The Patriots actually passed the ball more than I expected. That's also just because they're chasing points with the Seattle Seahawks. But you're right. It's Julian Edelman, 52% air yard share. That is the most in the NFL. And he's going to be seeing top 24 fantasy usage for as long as he stays healthy. That's the big concern. Julian Edelman looks like he's just taking hit after hit, and that's a slight concern. But if you drafted him as like the wide receiver 37 in fantasy drafts, you got to be loving this. Cam Newton looks awesome, and James White still hasn't returned to practice. But I still think that the running back situation is basically one to avoid because Cam Newton is tied for the league in inside the 10 carries up at 9. He's the true goal line back. So you would have to get really lucky with the random touchdown for any of the running backs to pay off.
Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray. Those are the only players you should be starting over Cam weekly.
I love it.
I got the Patriots. I mean, we think they're going to be run heavy, but we are seeing the rest of the league should just be embarrassed when they look at Bill Belichick, because we've already seen through 2 games as a Patriot, Cam Newton's had his 2nd most rushing attempts in a game and then 3rd most passing attempts in a game. So the Patriots understand they have a unique weapon that can be deployed a variety of ways. And through 2 games, I have seen all I need to see too. Cam Newton's in the top 8 every week. The guy already had produced Julian Edelman's career high receiving yards. I mean, this is just the Patriots. The rest of the league should be embarrassed at how easy the Patriots make this look, because it is not easy.
I know we need to move on, but Pat, big picture question here. Like, isn't this going to take an MVP level season from Cam Newton for them to be like a legitimate factor in the AFC? Because I look at, the Chiefs and the Ravens at the top, clearly. Then right after that, so far, it's the Steelers and the Bills. And I just don't know. And again, this is probably one of the playoff teams, especially with 7, teams in the AFC and 7 teams in the NFC this year. But can they really contend? And if Cam continues to play this way, yes, they will contend in a lot of games. But obviously, they've lost a lot of pieces to opt-outs or to free agency on defense. And offensively, again, we just talked about it, nothing explosive outside of the quarterback himself.
Yeah, I think really the only way the Patriots can contend at the level they're used to contending at is like extraordinary injury luck. Because like you said, there's the opt-outs on defense. There's not the true bell cow for a team that we think is going to want to run the ball a lot. There's no one behind Julian Edelman. I mean, they're now having to deploy their slot weapon as like a deep threat. And yeah, they're going to need really, really good injury luck. And yeah, for Cam Newton to sustain, and a guy who's had a foot injury and a shoulder injury in the past 2 years, to sustain MVP level production.
And a guy who is still charted at next gen stats with the most zip on his ball, the most velocity. So clearly that shoulder is back to full health.
I just hope it stays that way through November and December.
Yeah.
Like that was the worry in Carolina. I can tell you that was the worry in Carolina. And I just hope it lasts, because I'm so glad everyone is enjoying the play of Cam Newton. All right. San Francisco goes to New York Giants. Giants, 4.5-point home dogs, actually. A small, teeny tiny total of 41 points here. Hayden, I mean, heading into the season, this 49ers team, we wanted to invest in George Kittle. We wanted to invest in Raheem Mostert. Heck, we even wanted to invest in Jimmy Garoppolo because of the early season start that he has. All 3 of those pieces, except for Kittle, possibly, he's been limited this week in practice, or at least hobbled, if not out, for this contest. They're favored in this game, though, against the Giants. Explain it to me.
No Saquon Barkley, no Sterling Shepard, and the Giants also have a lot of missing elements on the offensive line as well. This is going to be a low-scoring game. The keys here is getting the running back touches right. We have Jerick McKinnon, who I believe is going to stay in his passing game role. He's a smaller back. I don't think that Shanahan wants to get him a full workload, especially coming off knee injuries. If the team's so worried about the turf and they don't even want to play George Kittle because the playing conditions aren't right, I would be shocked if Jerick McKinnon sees a bunch of touches here. That's why I'm kind of on the Jeffrey Wilson as a flex play train. And then on the other side of the ball, Dion Lewis versus Wayne Gallman versus Devonta Freeman. I want Dion Lewis this week as well. Daigle, what do you think about that?
On the Dion Lewis part or the 49ers backfield?
Either one. My thought with the Dion Lewis is we saw Jordan Renan come out and say that he's the best bet for touches. And I think he's the one that's familiar with the offense. They trust him in the passing game role, and they even gave him some goal line opportunities last week. I think that just in this environment, they're going to want to keep him on the field because Devonta Freeman can't even practice until he passed COVID protocols.
And that's the key here. For this week alone, I do like Dion Lewis. For long term, though, I still think Devonta Freeman leads this backfield in touches. On the other side of the ball, Kyle Shanahan sneakily came out and said that McKinnon is ready for an every down role after he talked with the team doctors, that he's far enough removed from his injury that they think he can handle enough touches as their featured back, which is something, one, that's really interesting and shakes it up, and 2, may need to jump on the news feed here because I'm not sure we grabbed that just yet. But then also, we have to talk about Jeffrey Wilson because remember, Tevin Coleman was injured for 2 games, weeks 2 and 3 last year. And rather than giving every single touch to Matt Breida, all they did was bring in Jeffrey Wilson to mix in with Breida. And he got 10 red zone touches. And he got, 6 carries inside the 10? Dang, I think I lost these numbers now.
It was a lot. Yeah.
Jeff Wilson was involved. He had 4 touches. He had 4 touchdowns inside the 10. Yes. So Jeff Wilson was involved. I think he's actually a flex play confidently this week if you're in a pinch because of injuries.
Daigle just went scuba diving without the gear, by the way. Like we've all been there at some point when you're making a point where you dive in and you're so confident in it. And then you look around, you're like, oh, I don't have the information I need to make this point. We've been there.
It's in the waiver wire column. I'll look it up.
You both make important points. It's Deion Lewis this week, but I think it's definitely Devontae Freeman going forward. They're both running on fumes, but I think Deion Lewis on even more fumes than Devontae Freeman. And I agree with Hayden, with Jerick McKinnon, a guy who has undersized, the injury history, and was never effective between the tackles, even when he was healthy as a Minnesota Viking. I think it's going to be the big Jeff Wilson week this week, which thoughts and prayers to us.
I went back and watched all the Brandon Ayuk targets from last week. There are only 3, so it didn't take me very long. I like those kinds of research. And 2 of them were manufactured touches. And, that's what we expected to see with Brandon Ayuk early in the season. I bet we see more and more of that after he made his debut last week. And I also feel bad about the Giants, Daigle, because, heading into the year, as Hayden alluded to, there had never been a snap of Daniel Jones, Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram, Golden Tate, Darius Slayton, and Saquon Barkley together. And now, 2 or 3 of those pieces are going to miss this game. And, what I saw last week with Daniel Jones, yes, in that primetime game on week 1, he showed some nice poise, some downfield ability. I thought he reverted back to a lot of that Jameis Winston-esque play last week. There was one where he had multiple pumps, hesitation, fumble in the pocket, and then another interception to start that second quarter. You can't have those 2 turnovers, and they almost came back and tied it or won it against the Bears, but you can't dig a hole like that and then try to play out of it in the NFL.
To quickly save myself some dignity, 13 red zone touches for Jeff Wilson in that 2-week span and 8 carries inside the 10. To your point on Brandon Ayuk, he actually ran a route on 78% of the team's dropbacks. So this is the week to snatch him sneakily. And to your point now, Daniel Jones, you don't want to play him this game, but Golden Tate would be the sneaky start. Because remember, in the 5 games that Sterling Shepard missed last year, Golden Tate led the team with a 23% target share. And this is not the 49ers defense we respect, nor are we scared of them.
2 more 1:00 games. We go to Cincinnati against Philadelphia. Yes, the Eagles, despite the chaos, despite the 0-2 starts for both these teams, the Eagles are 5.5-point home favorites here, a total of 46.5. Hayden, if I ask you which offense you believe in more right now, which one are you going to say?
It's close, honestly. Carson Wentz is 34th out of 34 quarterbacks in EPA per dropback, 33rd out of 34 in completion percentage over expected. He's playing like one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL right now. They have no Jalen Reagor. So I think that you're going to see a Miles Sanders heavy game script. The Bengals are allowing the most rush attempts on defense as well. So I think Miles Sanders, you can definitely be comfortable with. I think that Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert belong in the top 8. And then we have to kind of decide what we're going to do with Deshaun Jackson. His target share should come up just based off of injuries, but I think he's still more of a boom bust flex play. The Eagles have some, if they don't pull it off here, I mean, the Bengals are 31st in pass rush win rate. If they can't pull it off here, it is fully time to panic.
I'm still all in on Deshaun Jackson, given his role and the fact that Jalen Reagor is now out until at least week 10. Like, we're hoping for week 10. My God, what a disaster. But the good news is Miles Sanders returned from injury, and there was no lingering issues. 77% of the snaps, 83% of the team's running back carries, 70% of their running back targets, and 27 opportunities in the game. He is a clear-cut RB1, full steam ahead for the rest of the season.
I was shocked by how good Miles Sanders looked last week in a game where the Eagles lost yet another starting offensive lineman, lost their left guard, and he just no residual effects whatsoever from the hamstring injury. Lots of nice big plays. And again, against the Bengals defense, or Geno Atkins and Mike Daniels have not resumed practicing yet. This will probably be the get-right spot for the Eagles. And Miles Sanders is arguably a top 5 running back. It's a loaded week at running back. You could argue for him in the top 5, but he's clearly top 8.
You're talking to the guy that drafted Deshaun Jackson, Jalen Reagor in every single lineup this year, but I'm quietly confident in starting Deshaun Jackson this week. Yep. I know, like, they've even tried to get him targets closer to the line of scrimmage, especially last week, and then now without, Jalen Reagor possibly in the fold, possibly taking targets away. I understand Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz are the top 2 options right now, but if there's ever a week to get something going, it has to be this week for Deshaun Jackson. And I'm looking at their schedule moving forward. Daigle, have you looked at this? I mean, it's Cincinnati this week. The next 3 games after that, San Francisco, Pittsburgh, both away, and then the Baltimore Ravens for the Eagles. Like, if they don't win this week, it could easily be an 0-6 start for this Eagles team that at one point this offseason, I know they dealt with a ton of injuries, but one point this offseason, there was an argument to be made that they were one of the more talented rosters, I thought, from top to bottom in the NFL.
That could be 0-6 start for my fantasy teams too. On the other side of the ball, though, I mean, there's just a lot to discuss. I'll quickly get Joe Mixon out of the way because he's not getting the opportunities we thought he would. Basically, he won't hit his ceiling unless he starts playing more over Gio Bernard. He has run 4 more routes than Bernard on the entire season, but he's still been out targeted, and he's doing so much more and being much more efficient on those targets. So you have to keep starting him as a fringe RB1, but fingers crossed he's involved more in the passing game moving forward.
I was going to say with Joe Mixon, he's actually hit 20 touches each of the first 2 weeks. And he was more involved as a pass catcher in week 2, where I don't think, for me, the concern isn't really Giovanni Bernard, even though that is a concern. It really is the Bengals offensive line, which has just been terrifyingly bad. And that to me is the real concern for Joe Mixon. And will the Bengals have any answers whatsoever with their blocking? Because it is a concerning situation. I mean, you saw Joe Burrow last week. I mean, this instantly folded in on him. A heroic performance from Joe Burrow, but big concern for Joe Burrow, but an even bigger concern for Joe Mixon.
Hayden, I get on the show every week and talk about wanting to avoid bad teams with bad records and not garbage time. I think there's an asterisk next to the Bengals because I'm okay playing players on this offense because I believe in this offense in those situations, right? They play quick. He gets the ball out despite, pressure he might be feeling and despite what the scoreboard might be saying. Tyler Boyd hasn't been quite what we want him to have been so far. AJ Green is getting massive air yard share, but he's not coming down with that ball yet. We talked about Joe Mixon already. I can keep going on and on down the list, but I not a fan of garbage time, but this Bengals team does get it done in those situations so far.
Yeah, I think we need to treat Joe Burrow as a top 12 fantasy quarterback moving forward based off of volume, based off of the athleticism, and they have a lot of talent around him as well. Tyler Boyd has a 13% target share, and I think that this can be explained by the Bengals moving towards a 4-receiver set, a 5-receiver set. They went empty last week, and that went really, really well. I'd be kind of curious to see if the Bengals are going to use 5 receivers, including maybe Joe Mixon split out wide, maybe Joe Burrow or Giovanni Bernard split out wide. This is something that Joe Burrow is comfortable with. They did this at LSU. I think that they're going to go very wide receiver heavy, and that's going to certainly help out Joe Burrow. The question becomes, is AJ Green washed? The leader in air yards. He was the wide receiver 5 in fantasy usage through the first 2 weeks. Is he washed? I think that he's probably a little washed. He's certainly not going to live up to my model's expectations, but you cannot go from wide receiver 5 fantasy usage and be completely unplayable. I'm firing him up one more time as a flex play this week. I think that he's going to get it done. The one thing is he was playing on Thursday night. Give him a couple extra days, get that 32-year-old leg warmed up, and I think eventually we'll get AJ Green and his 25% target share back on the top 36, top 40 fantasy radar.
Hey, I do have to disagree with you on Joe Burrow being top 12 right now, because basically the Bengals got one garbage time miracle after another last week. They kept converting 4th downs, but they took advantage of a few penalties, I think. And Joe Burrow's supporting cast, I mean, we're not used to a rookie having a somewhat decent supporting cast. It's not like Sam Darnold or Sam Bradford was 10 years ago, but I think Joe Burrow's supporting cast has been a bit oversold because it is a 32-year-old AJ Green who's barely played the past few years. Tyler Boyd is a really good slot receiver, but that's what he is, a really good slot receiver. John Ross, is John Ross. T. Higgins, total unknown commodity at the NFL level. And they needed everything to go right for him to have the fantasy day that he did in week 2. And I mean, he was just inches away from taking several more sacks. And to me, I'm actually kind of hitting the brakes a little bit on the Bengals. I got a huge week-winning effort out of Joe Burrow last week in my super flex, but I actually came away more concerned than kind of heartened just because they needed everything to go right for that to happen. And behind that offensive line, that's just not going to happen on a weekly basis.
As for AJ Green, you can't lead the league in prayer yards hoping to catch deep balls whenever your hips touch your ankles because you have no knees. They're just bad targets deep from Joe Burrow right now.
Disagree.
10 of Green's 22 targets have been charted as catchable this year, which is the lowest rate among 38 receivers with 11-plus targets. I just don't think he's getting up to catch them. So it is a concise battle right now between Hayden and I on what the numbers are showing and what the film is showing, which is odd because I'm usually in Hayden's corner.
Well, with AJ Green, it's not completely like the worst targets in the world. The catch rate is the catch rate right now is bad, but it's not going to be 45% the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. And my model does adjust for like where the targets are going. If they're in the red zone, that's a good thing. If they're in the middle of the field, that's also a good thing. And I think that they just need a little bit of chemistry here. I don't want to completely just rule him out completely after two games within 5 days of each other. I want to give him just a couple more weeks.
That's Hayden talking about 32-year-old knees and ankles like he knows what he's talking about. You've got about 7 more years there, buddy. The rest of us, yes, we do. You, Hayden, not so fast.
He's a wide receiver 3 on volume, though.
A real quick point to all of our points was that AJ Green got shook up on his very first target last week, so maybe he just wasn't healthy.
Go figure.
Let's go. Houston Texans go to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Hopefully this is a fun game, although the Texans are 0-2 and 4-point underdogs with a total of 45 in this game. I have put Deshaun Watson on the bust list for the second straight week this week. You know, he didn't do it last week, and I'm terrified again this week. You know, we talked about the narrative heading into the season that hopefully they were going to make things easy for him. And it kind of has been with the script, but he's not getting Randall Cobb involved enough. He's not getting David Johnson involved enough in the passing game. And I'm just terrified that this Pittsburgh Steelers defensive front and secondary is just going to bottom up once again for a second week in a row.
He's been the QB 11 and the QB 21 through 2 games, not the guy we drafted as a top 6 option. And now it's not his fault, right? They are literally running through the AFC's finest and starting out against the Chiefs, Ravens, and the Steelers, an insane schedule with just the most uncreative offense we've seen in the entire league outside of the Jets and the Vikings. So it's not his fault at all. The issue is now what's happened to Will Fuller. Like, we can open a Where's Waldo book and instead try to find Will Fuller, since he stayed on the trainer's table through the first half, and he's not on Wednesdays or Thursdays injury report at all. So even in starting both Deshaun Watson and Will Fuller, it's not really a question of showing up to our Sunday show and asking us to start them. You have to look deep inside yourself. Like, you have to meditate and ask yourself, how willing am I to hurt on Sunday? And as it goes for Will Fuller, buddy, I'm willing to hurt. I am ready to roll him out and do this one more time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm keeping him in the top 20 this week. I mean, we just had an 8-catch for 100-yard game. It's another horrible matchup. The schedule finally eases up in week 4 and 5. It's the Jaguars and Vikings. But, yeah, I mean, Will Fuller's the kind of guy where the Steelers are a really tough secondary, really tough defense. But matchups don't really matter that much for Will Fuller. I mean, when you can get the level of separation he does down the field, it matters from the perspective of, will Deshaun Watson have enough time to hit those targets? And, again, he wasn't just down the field in week 1, so not trying to make it sound like he's only a deep threat. But, yeah, bad games happen in fantasy football. It's very frustrating because it's such a short season. But to me, Will Fuller is still safely a top 20 option for week 3.
All right, Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, James Conner took back that feature back workload in some ways after losing it immediately in week 1. Hayden, when I went and back and watched that game, I thought James Conner looked like Dookie. Like, I just thought he looked plodding. I thought he looked slow. I thought he had no vision. There was no quickness. There was no explosion to his game. It's concerning. I mean, we talked about the new right tackle, right guard. But again, it doesn't matter because he's going to get the volume. He's going against the Houston Texans, which so far has also been one of the worst defenses in the NFL outside of J.J. Watt, who looks fantastic.
You're right. The Steelers are 29th in rushing EPA, and the Texans defense is 28th in rushing EPA. So I think you're just going to get the battle, and the volume always wins in these types of things. So I think that James Conner is comfortably an RB2. The thing I'm keep paying attention to with the Steelers is this offense just looks way different to me. You're seeing Big Ben just taking check down after check down after check down, and it's been very efficient, and he has the receivers, the tight ends, the running backs to make it work. And I think that Deontay Johnson is a perfect fit with Big Ben, and I was not expecting that. Deontay Johnson still is very inconsistent, but his ADOT just matches up perfectly with Big Ben, who doesn't want to take hits now that he's 37 or 38, and the offensive line is not as good as it was in previous seasons. You're going to see a dink and dunk approach. It's going to be a little slower pace than normal. It's the path. They're going to run the ball a little bit more than normal, but Big Ben could still be a borderline quarterback 1-2 in the right matchups. And I think that Deontay Johnson and Juju Smith-Schuster are both going to be able to pay off just because they're going to be hitting these quick hitting throws.
I'm going to say it until it's not true, Pat. This offense is too big to fail in the passing game because they just have way too many pieces to not be good as long as Ben Roethlisberger's in there, even if he's throwing at 85%, 75% capacity. And I think that's exactly what he's doing. I mean, we mentioned all that without even suggesting that Chase Claypool is good for one massive play per game, like he was last week, like he was in week 1. And if they continue to give him more opportunities ahead of Washington or split their time 50-50, that only makes this offense even more dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, Chase Claypool is a potentially special player with like deep, like big play receiver ability and like a tight end's body. And to me, the question for this offense, it's been 2 games, so probably getting ahead of myself, but who is the number 1 receiver in this offense? Juju Smith-Schuster has run slightly more routes and he has more touchdowns. And then Deontay Johnson has the advantage in everything else: catches, targets, yards, air yards. And this may be after a summer of like speculation from the Steelers press corps that they're going to let Juju Smith-Schuster walk. I wouldn't be shocked if the first 2 weeks were not statistical noise and Deontay Johnson is actually emerging as his number 1 receiver. It's an offense that doesn't mean curtains for Juju Smith-Schuster, of course. It's an offense that has long supported 2 receivers, very capable of supporting 2 top 20 fantasy receivers. But that is what I'm really monitoring going forward with the Steelers. And whatever they injected into James Conner's ankle last week worked, by the way, because that was quite a surprising turnaround for him.
Is that some zap friskiness for Deontay Johnson?
He had a point.
I was right about Terry McLaurin.
I got to listen to him real quick because what he's saying, Pat, is that Juju Smith-Schuster has never been a number 1 wide receiver. He's put up production in the NFL, but that's when Antonio Brown was on the outside as well. And we saw last year, and I understand it was Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges, and it didn't really count. But rarely do we see great offenses like the Steelers can be this year that flow through their slot receiver. It flows through an outside receiver that can also move around the formation and win after catch, and that's Deontay Johnson. It's just a really fun team, and I would put them in the top 4 of the AFC right now.
They can both be successful. That's the thing.
Totally.
And in rankings, I think you're behind if you're not always putting Deontay ahead of Juju for the rest of the season.
I mean, I'm just still such a believer in Juju. I think Juju's
me too.
much better. Well, I think he's just much better than Deontay, and I think that over the course of the season, we're going to see this fluctuate back and forth a little bit. I still would rather have Juju than Deontay, but I think both of them belong in like the top 24, top 25 receivers just about in every week.
Those Steelers stacks are really paying off so far, Daigle.
And in their 5 quarters together, which is what I was about to say, James Conner has outcarried Benny Snell 22-5 and handled all 5 of the team's touches inside the 10. As long as he's healthy, he's the bell cow.
Speaking of John Daigle, let's go to the New York Jets going to the Indianapolis Colts.
I was wondering when it would come up.
The Colts are 11-point favorites here, a total of 44. Did you hear that, Daigle? 11-point favorites the Colts are over your New York Jets. Is there anything you would like to say?
Would you like steak or a salad?
Oh yeah, we're having a $75 Ruth Chris Steakhouse lunch.
Oh, okay.
And you sent it to me via Venmo. That's what we're doing. What were you thinking last week?
To be fair, it was a good number, and honestly, I'm not even kidding here. It's a good number this week, but we're not going there. We don't double down. We learn from our mistakes in the Rotoworld podcast.
I mean, what is wild, and what we're talking about, hopefully you listened to last week's show. What was it? A 7-point spread? 7 No, 7.5.
It was 7. Oh,
yeah, 7. Anyways, with the Jets and the 49ers, nothing went right for the 49ers, Daigle, and they still lost by about 4 touchdowns. I mean, it's crazy. Like, immediately you knew you made a mistake, yet I just love how confident it was in the Silva Sanctuary, in the groupthink that was taking place over there, where you were living this bubble. Talk about the cocoon. You were the cocoon for the New York Jets and Adam Gase right now. That's what happened last week.
I was the conductor for sure. I was leading the way on that one, but we knew we had lost from the very first play, 80-yard Mostert touchdown. And then to stuff the 49ers offense inside their 20, 3rd and 31, and they strike a 55-yard run to pick up the first down. Just all downhill. The lesson is they are not our Jets. They are never bet on Gase, ever.
Well, let's talk about this game, Pat. Like I said, the Colts are 11-point favorites. We've seen some real good stuff from Phillip Rivers through 2 weeks. We've also seen some vintage Phillip Rivers as well. Now we know that Paris Campbell's out of this game. He's been a factor, at least in week 1. Michael Pittman stepped up as an outside receiver last week. It seems like Zach Pascal is going to be in the slot. But this team, again, Pat, through 2 weeks, Marlon Mack out in week 1, Paris Campbell out in week 2. Yet I think we still have enough belief in the Colts that they can win this week and keep on winning as well.
Oh yeah, it's just I would say it's a real shame the game's not in New York, so Daigle could be back on the spread, and I could be kind of like secretly encouraging him to do that, because I played a shadow part in that last week. I feel like where I kind of secretly nudged him that way so he could say it and I didn't have to. But I mean, it's going to be a very simple formula for the Colts. 40 rushes, very much in play again for a team where last week the formula, thankfully, that we thought they should employ, they did. And Jonathan Taylor, a 20-1 carry advantage over Nyheim Hines. This in the first half, 28-1 touch advantage for the game. They did what made sense. They should do it again this week. John Taylor, already a top 5 running back one. And, the Colts passing game has not been great. T.Y. Hilton last week with another just inexplicable drop. This one on a 44-yard touchdown. And maybe they'll try to rebuild his confidence with some layups this week as they just steamroll the Jets at the running game. And no Paris Campbell, it's a real shit. He got hurt on an end around, a play where he almost made an explosive play, creative usage. So a lot of pressure now on Michael Pittman. This is not a very deep passing attack. And Phillip Rivers, he can still make the easy throws, but we see, when the game is to get put on the shoulders late, we still saw the interceptions in week 1. We saw an interception last week too. And this is going to be riding the running game, hopefully getting T.Y. Hilton right. And not betting the Jets to cover the spread.
Lots of fallout in week 2 from this Colts offense. 28 touches to Nyheim Hines 1 for Jonathan Taylor, which was disturbing. Even going to high stakes league, picking up Hines was not a bad choice. His median bid in those high stakes leagues was $683 fab dollars out of 1,000. So everyone, no matter the format, believed in him. But what they showed us is that as long as they are the better offense and they are winning a game, this is Jonathan Taylor's backfield. So Nyheim Hines genuinely doesn't fit in if it doesn't fit in a game script, the Colts are projected to lead, and that's what this is here. And that also affected T.Y. Hilton, who played 58% of the team snaps and was taken off the field for Michael Pittman so Michael Pittman could block so they could preserve T.Y. Hilton. And so with Paris Campbell being out, what that tells me is that Zach Pascal's actually the direction we should go, because Pittman only ran 13% of his routes at USC from the slot. He's not a slot guy. And Pascal was thrown into the slot for 20 snaps, caught his touchdown from there whenever Campbell got injured. So for me, it's T.Y. Hilton we still have to believe, even though we are scared, and then Pascal in the passing game.
Hayden, any thoughts on this game?
I have T.Y. Hilton written up in my fantasy usage column as a rebound candidate. I still believe in him to some degree as like a wide receiver 3 flex play. Michael Pittman did run around on 97% of dropbacks last week. So I think that there is some long-term appeal with them, but you guys are right. It's just Jonathan Taylor, 10.5 point favorites. He's going to be a stud this week and we can move on.
Yeah, I just see that Indianapolis Colts offensive line creating a wall for Phillip Rivers. Like the Jets offer nothing. They just offer nothing. And
we
him
know.
just being
Don't
able,
worry.
yeah, we definitely know now moving forward. Some of us just learn things in life later than others, Daigle. All right, let's go to the Carolina Panthers against the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are 6.5 point home favorites here, a total of 43.5. Pat, what do you think about Justin Herbert's debut? Because he's getting another start here because of the madness that happened on that training staff. I'm sure Hayden has some things to share on that he cannot put on a podcast. But I mean, what Herbert does to me, Pat, is he opens the ceiling and heightens the ceiling of every single player on this Chargers offense.
I was just extremely impressed because I came into the season as a Justin Herbert skeptic, where I saw a guy that I kind of thought, despite having like a high yards per attempt, I just thought was too conservative in the Pac-12. And the times where he wasn't conservative, I saw too many kind of like dumbfounding throws down the field. Justin Herbert had more than one meme throw at Oregon where like the ball just like sailed out the back of the end zone, like 20 yards over every one of his targets. But last week we saw a guy who was decisive, saw someone who was poised and wasn't afraid to pull the trigger. Thankfully involved Austin Eckler in the passing game again, only 4 targets. But that was one of the biggest takeaways is that, there's going to be Justin Herbert wasn't a check down artist last week, but he will check down. That is a big part of his game. We're going to get check downs again to Austin Eckler. And this is the matchup, the Carolina Panthers. And so glad that, and after doing well in a tough matchup, he gets now like a much easier matchup, and we can get a even further idea of who he's going to be as an NFL quarterback. Where it was just, as a Herbert skeptic, I was very, very impressed from a guy who found out 20 minutes before the game he was going to start.
We're talking about Justin Herbert when it's the matchup for Eckler and in particular Joshua Kelly. Joshua Kelly to have 23 carries last week and now lead Austin Eckler 6-1 inside the 10-yard line tells us he's going to be involved heavily in that Melvin Gordon-like role. And in this game, we already know the Panthers defense in 2020 is the Panthers defense of 2019, and just in allowing Josh Jacobs 25 carries for 90 yards and 3 scores. And then the Bucs backfield combined 19 carries, 126 yards and 3 scores. Like, this is Joshua Kelly's and Austin Eckler's game for them both to shine.
Yeah, I'm playing Joshua Kelly in the flex, Hayden, and I'm confident in it. Like, I've been really impressed by Joshua Kelly. We talk about, our pre-draft and preseason thoughts on Justin Herbert. I think if we had a preseason, Joshua Kelly would have been a middle round pick in fantasy drafts. I mean, what he is showing in terms of his north-south running, in terms of his one cut running, and against a defensive line that is being absolutely gashed. I mean, Derek Brown, the rookie top 10 pick for the Panthers so far, is like one of the last ranked players at his position, according to PFF. Imagine that with unathletic defensive tackles. But, Joshua Kelly is someone who, isn't the lead back, because that's Austin Eckler, but he's getting lead back touches. And this is, again, 6.5-point home favorites here. Absolutely the type of matchup you want to take advantage of.
Definitely. And the Chargers have shown it. They were 4th in play action rate under Justin Herbert last week. They want to set up the offense off of the run. And I think that the whole offensive scheme is just going to work just because the matchup. So I think you want to start all of these guys, maybe even Mike Williams, who's just like so boom bust, but maybe you can trot him out there as a flex play. So I think that you're definitely going to want pieces of the Chargers offense. On the other side, we have to basically decide, what is Curtis Samuel's role? What is Mike Davis's role with McCaffrey out? All I know is DJ Moore has a 39% touch share, not target share, touch share while trailing. And the Chargers are 7-point favorites here. So I think that DJ Moore belongs in like the top 12, despite a very, very tough matchup against these corners. The volume's just simply going to be there.
I'm a big fan of Curtis Samuel, as everyone knows. And even I am not willing to go there like some people are, just predicting that he is going to get backfield work. Like, that is Daigle, that's a major leap.
No, I'm going to agree with you. I think people say that on social media just for the likes and retweets. That's clearly not true, right? I mean, he's not a running back.
I'm hearing
people believe that.
I'm hearing it a lot as a joke. I
don't think people really believe that.
There's a few. I won't name names. There is a few.
We need to kick them out.
It's like definition of a leap of faith. Let's just put it
over under 4.5 carries for Curtis Samuel, and I would probably take the under.
I would take the over, actually. But he's not a running back.
You're one.
He got 4 carries in the game with Christian McCaffrey. Why wouldn't you take an over?
Anyways, I think Mike Davis is going to be the lead running back here.
Of course.
Yeah. I mean, but what I'm saying is, there is basically, unless I'm in a complete bind, my roster absolutely sucks. There is no way I'm still playing Curtis Samuel after we've seen the floors and even the ceilings that DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson have so far. Pat, where did you end up ranking Mike Davis this week?
I've got him as the RB 18. I think this is basically like a 1-for-1 situation. John is right. I mean, the carries did happen for Curtis Samuel last week, but I mean, my guess on that is just kind of an offense kind of ad-libbing on the fly. And that now that they're like, can install a Mike Davis game plan, I think it's going to be close to a 1-for-1. Maybe we'll get a few 2-3 end arounds or something for Curtis Samuel. But I mean, Mike Davis, who else is he going to give these touches to? And this is an offense that has to run the ball. And I view Mike Davis as a top 20 back. And to me, even though Christian McCaffrey wasn't a season-ending injury, I thought Mike Davis was by far the most bang for your buck on waiver wires this week. And you're going to have to top 20 back, I think, as long as he stays healthy.
And as of Thursday, Reggie Bonnafon hasn't been promoted to the active squad, I believe. So it's still kind of just Mike Davis hanging around here. We want running back touches, or we want running back targets, and we're going to get that for sure from Mike Davis. So he's an RB2.
With the rules this year, like, we've seen Jerry McNichols, we've seen Josh Adams like come in on like the morning of.
Yeah.
So like none of that. And just to hedge here, Daigle, yes, I think Curtis Samuel has the talent, if they wanted to, like we saw at Ohio State, to work out of the backfield. So maybe that happens, but I'm willing to miss a week when the Panthers are 6.5-point road favorites, or road dogs, in Curtis Samuel's first, foray into that role on an NFL field. If it happens, it happens. I'm just not predicting it.
Which is why you should read the waiver wire, Josh, because I wrote in the player notes that Curtis Samuel is a stash, given that he had 4 carries.
Okay. Detroit Lions, Arizona Cardinals, a massive whopping total. We got a bunch of totals, high ones left on the slate. 55. Cardinals 5.5-point favorites here. The Cardinals are also, Pat, 2-0. I know we get Kenny Golladay back, hopefully, and hopefully that elevates the Matthew Stafford experience so far, but the experience that has been one of the best in the NFL has been Kyler Murray making the leap even more than he did last year, and then DeAndre Hopkins just being an absolute consistent force on the outside and the inside.
Yeah, I mean, Kyler Murray becoming like the true dual threat. Not that he wasn't last year, almost 600 yards rushing, but I mean, he is playing true dual threat quarterback football. And so, I mean, this is a stratospheric spot for the Cardinals. I mean, 55 over under. I mean, we know there's one higher than that this week. I mean, that is rarefied air for an NFL over under. My only concern, quote unquote, is, I mean, the Lions' pass defense is awful. The Lions' run defense, I mean, is historically awful. Mm-hmm. And Kenyon Drake, off to a pretty sluggish start. And the Lions, I mean, they're allowing 204 rushing yards per game. I mean, yeah, this is a very pat joke, but I mean, this is like when you discover a planet like based on a mathematical calculation instead of like with the telescope. We're told the Lions' run defense exists, but we've never actually seen it. And like Kenyon Drake, this is probably the Kenyon Drake game. Hopefully the Kyler Murray game on the ground, but yeah, just the only fear there is that they don't dial up the passing attack as much as we would like, because Matt Patricia is just a joke. Like, this is a joke. And I mean, Hayden, I think, had some really great tweets on that last week. Like he's got to go. And just fire up the Cardinals.
I mean, you're talking about planets. He is a rocket scientist. Maybe this is his
true.
Maybe he's the one who can find it. Hayden, how are the Lions going to keep up here with a total of 55, just 5.5-point dogs? Who are we expecting to have big games?
From the Lions, I'm going back to the well with Marvin Jones. I'm definitely starting up Kenny Golladay. I think TJ Hawkinson is the big loser through 2 weeks. Only a 12% target share without Golladay. He's seeing tight end 23 numbers. I think you have to keep him like in the tight end 2 mix, even though this is one of the best tight end matchups in the league. And I think that this is, yes, that is true. I think this is an offense you want to be buying in season-long leagues, because when Matt Patricia gets fired after this week, you're going to be getting a new head coach in Darrell Bevell, who's just going to go all in on the passing game. So DeAndre Swift's, I think, a long-term buy. I think Marvin Jones a long-term buy, Kenny Golladay a long-term buy, and same thing with Matthew Stafford. This week, they have basically no chance. They are the worst pass rush in the league, and it's not even close.
When you bet on Adam Gase, it only makes sense to learn from your mistakes and bet on Matt Patricia. And that's why the Lions are the week 3 upset of the week. The Cardinals were 6-point favorites over Washington, and now they're 6-point favorites over the Lions. So you're telling me that the Lions and the Washington are equal teams on neutral field? I don't believe that at all. I was talking with Sharp Football's Rich Rebar, and he pointed out, and I'm crediting him because I didn't notice this whatsoever, is that the reason this Lions offense isn't so explosive right now is because Kenny Golladay has controlled Stafford's ADOT. Like, Stafford's deep ball rate was 20% last year with Golladay, whereas this year without it, it's cut in half to 10%. So if we get Golladay, who's been limited on Wednesday and Thursday practices, we can expect this offense to become explosive again and a shootout. And I like the Lions to cover the 6 points, and for the sake of the bit, upset the Cardinals.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, major cringe. Should we just move on and forget he said that? Let's just move on. All right.
This one makes way more sense than the last week's one.
They both made sense, but it's okay.
Yeah. No, because the Jets aren't involved. The Jets.
I thought last week's made more sense. I'm just going to be honest.
Pat, you just little instigator. Look at you just
poking me from afar.
The Bucs are on the road against Denver Broncos, and the Bucs are 6-point favorites, a total of 43.5. Where do we want to start here? I guess we need to start with Denver and what has changed. There is Jeff Driscoll in at quarterback instead of Drew Lock, even though Drew Lock has not played well. But at the receiver position, Cortland Sutton, I believe, is out for the year, right? It's a knee injury. And Jerry Jeudy has, gotten consistent volume. I believe 8 targets at least in each game. And, he's dropping some opportunities. He's making some plays. But Hayden, I know you went back and watched this game like I did. I wasn't in love with what Jeff Driscoll showed as a winning quarterback. Let's put it that way. Because when his first read wasn't there, he shelled up, he turtled up, and he dropped his eyes and just looked confused. But then I go back and check his air yards and his intended air yards per game or per throw, and he's highest in the NFL right now at 12.3. So I guess that's a little bit of music to our ears in someone like Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler and Noah Fant and so on and so forth.
The bad news is the Bucs defense is not one to mess with. At least Jeff Driscoll can move around a little bit. I believe in KJ Hamler as like a bench asset moving forward. Definitely believe in Jerry Jeudy moving forward. Definitely believe in Noah Fant moving forward. But yeah, the Broncos are projected for 18.75 points this week. It's not going to be too pretty.
To be clear, your KJ Hamlers and your Jeff Driscoll's, you are picking them up this week to play them against #our Jets next week. You're not worried about week 3 against the Bucs, who are going to roll in this matchup.
Do we like the 6 points then? I mean, 6 points is not a lot with the Tom Brady. I think Tom Brady is playing kind of well. Like I went back and watched that game. In fact, he's playing pretty well. And in week 1, he missed some throws and there were some miscommunications. I think last week his receivers let him down quite a bit, and it wasn't the Scotty Miller, Justin Watson performance that we were all expecting. But they just had that game covered. Like after that Mike Evans seam pass and then the Mike Evans touchdown, like they could just run the football, and Leonard Fournette was in there as the closer. Pat, I could see, this being really the first game that we see this Bucs offense with Chris Godwin back in it, running at full steam against this Denver Broncos defense that we know is obviously without Von Miller and has been so far this season.
Yeah, you hit on the central point. We just haven't seen the real Bucs offense yet because Mike Evans was very limited in week 1, and Chris Godwin, with the concussion, and last week 2, they were just seemed like kind of messing around, trying to figure some things out in a game that was not competitive. And so, yeah, I mean, Tom Brady, I think, has just looked totally fine. Basically, that's how I would describe it. I thought he looked better than Drew Brees in week 1. Like I said, week 2 was just inconclusive, but yeah, I'm very interested to see. I guess the risk is that they could just go super run heavy again and have another week kind of experimentation, trying to figure out exactly how they want to do this with their passing attack. But yeah, very excited to finally see the supporting cast at full health. But yeah, I also wouldn't be shocked if we get like a 25-30 carries again, and that we still don't have any firm answers in the passing attack. But at least they're all healthy at once.
Daigle, how are you viewing this backfield with the Bucs?
We were confident in Ronald Jones last week until he ran into Tom Brady and fumbled inside the 20. And we didn't think Fournette's snap rate would jump from 13% to 50%. It did not. Good news. It jumped from 43%. And then with the extra touches he got over the second half, he ran away with it. In a soft matchup, yes, but it is clear they are going to at least allow him to out-touch this backfield. I believe when Bruce Arians talks, because he's a man who speaks in the present. Whatever he's thinking at the time, that's exactly how he's going to approach the game. And he said that all 3 will still be involved still. I believe him. However, we should still expect, 12 to 16 carries for Leonard Fournette to lead this backfield as the number 1 running back.
Yeah, what I see with Fournette is a player who's taken hold of the Derrick Henry role, and maybe it's even going to expand beyond there. Because what the Titans' game plan has been is to go up by 2 scores, and even if that's in the first quarter, then we know what they're getting with Derrick Henry, right? And he's the ultimate closer. Leonard Fournette on his 46-yard touchdown run, whatever it was, he just had to run in a straight line, and that's it. And we know he can run in a straight line; he can't do much else. But I also think that Ronald Jones on that missed handoff that he had with Tom Brady, miscommunication. The one thing we have learned about Tom Brady is you don't want to get on his bad side. And if Leonard Fournette stays on his good side and Ronald Jones on his bad side, then I would expect him once again, Fournette, to have a much bigger day out of this backfield.
The good thing is also we can go ahead and shed both tight ends, Gronk and O.J. Howard, after Arians came out this week and said, we are not throwing it 50 times to the tight ends. That's what we have receivers for.
That was an amazing quote.
It's great.
All right.
Well, real quick, they're not going to be throwing it too much in general. Their neutral pass rate stand at 43%. That's 25th in the league. That needs to come up if Chris Godwin's going to pay off, Mike Evans is going to pay off, Tom Brady's going to pay off. I'm guessing that was kind of just a workflow without the receivers fully healthy, but that is something to at least watch. 25th is low. That's really low.
Would any of you be trading for Chris Godwin right now or leaving it be?
I'm just worried because he missed a whole week, Pat, right? So, the person who's rostering him isn't going to say, well, he put up a 0 for me and he just didn't play, right? Or when he played. So I think you just have to give up too much in order to get Chris Godwin.
I just think that what we kind of thought of, Chris Godwin still on paper is he is like the Tom Brady receiver, even though he's more than Julian Edelman as like a receiving talent. He is the talent who on paper meshes the best with Tom Brady. So yeah, I would not be scared of going out and acquiring Chris Godwin.
Biggest total of the weekend. The Dallas Cowboys go to the Seattle Seahawks. Seahawks 5-point favorites. The total of 56 whopping points. We know Seattle's game, and we know that they're throwing the football more than ever, Hayden. And neutral game scripts on first down, we love to see it. But we're also seeing about Dallas is offensive line questions. Hopefully it's a bit healthier this year or this week. And I think what those offensive line trickle down has been with his injuries, it's kind of eliminating the deep balls to Michael Gallup, the deep shots to Michael Gallup, but it's really opening up a lot of opportunities to CeeDee Lamb in the slot, who we know was fantastic after the catch at Oklahoma.
CeeDee Lamb is going to be a star. It's very obvious, and he's playing in the slot at 91%. He has wide receiver 24 fantasy usage. You have to rank CeeDee Lamb over Michael Gallup at this point. Michael Gallup, 11% target share. That's going to come up eventually. He's still the big play threat, but I think he's more of a boom bust wide receiver 3 flex than like a locked and loaded wide receiver 3, just because Amari Cooper has really established himself as the alpha of the group. And this is a loaded group. This offense is going to be awesome. The Seahawks have allowed the most plays on defense, not just because they're passing the ball at such a high rate. This game, I would still take the over here. You want pieces of this on both sides of the ball. And it's the good news is targets are super concentrated in this game. You know where they're going to, especially on the Seahawks side. I think this is just the game of the week by far.
The Seahawks have allowed 11 more catches to wide receivers than any other defense and a league-high 731 receiving yards to that position. The next closest is the Falcons with 524 yards allowed to wide receivers. And like Hayden said, the good news is the Cowboys' target tree is dwindled. Yes, you can still play Dalton Schultz as a tight end running routes who is guaranteed to see targets, but it still is Amari, CeeDee Lamb, and then Gallup as the boomer bust guy.
Yeah, I mean, that is the stat. When I saw the 730 yards to receivers through 2 games, I went and by hand like double checked it yesterday because it just seemed false. Like that could not possibly be true. But it's very, very true. And the Seahawks probably the league's worst pass rush. There's just zero reason for fear with this Cowboys offense. And yet what Hayden said is what I'm most interested now with the Cowboys is CeeDee Lamb passing Michael Gallup, because I have them back to back in the rankings this week. I believe wide receiver 25 and 26. I'm just not quite ready to fully bury Michael Gallup, but it certainly seems like we're witnessing CeeDee Lamb pass him in real time.
It's also incredible what Mike McCarthy came out and said. You know, I think a reporter asked him if you're going to run the football to keep the possession away from Russell Wilson. He said flat out no, that we know that in order to win these games, you have to just score more points than your opponent. And we're just going to try to score more points than Seattle Seahawks. I mean, everyone in the boat here. Let's get it going. Let's have some fun at 4:25 Eastern on Sunday afternoon.
It moved a little bit when he said that. I got to be quite honest with you.
My parting question is, who told Mike McCarthy that fake punts were analytics? That's all I want to know.
I mean, there were some very questionable decisions, not the ones that Chris Sims gets upset about, but there were some very questionable decisions in that game, including that 4th and 2 or 3 going for the fake punt that was underthrown, I believe, instead of just, why not just go for it when you have the playmakers like we've talked about.
And to mention injuries on the other side of the ball, like the Cowboys corners, despite Mike Nolan not understanding or knowing what he's doing anymore in the league, like they're still missing Awuzie, and Trevon Diggs has also been injured in practice as well. So for DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, who have combined for 30 of Wilson's 63 attempts, like it's to the moon this week.
Sunday night football. Yes, the Green Bay Packers go to the New Orleans Saints, 52.5 total. Here, the Saints are 3.5-point home favorites here. Hayden, every single week, I look at all these lines. I see one game that stands out to me. This is the game. Why are the Saints favorites after what we just saw last week, after Michael Thomas possibly coming back from an ankle injury, but probably not? And with the Packers already showing in 2 ways how they can beat you. They can beat you with Aaron Rodgers' arm, throwing it to Devontae Adams, throwing it to MVS. And then last week with Aaron Jones showing superstar speed and skills and just dicing up their opponent.
Yeah, for me with the game, it's the Saints are projected for 27 points. I feel like that's a little too high just because the way Breeze is playing. He's 31st out of 34 in completion percentage over expected, despite playing behind the 4th best offensive line in football. They're not passing the ball enough. They're 30th in neutral pass rate. This is just Alvin Kamara and what he can do after the catch and then go home in this offense right now. It is not a good scene for the New Orleans Saints. And Rotopaddle, just toss it to you. Aaron Jones, RB1 right now, RB1 fantasy usage. The craziest stat that I found, he has 14 targets on 36 routes run. So whenever he's out in space, it is just automatic Aaron Jones, and it is just off to the races.
Yeah, that was something the whole industry seemed to forget this summer, is just what a special receiving talent Aaron Jones is. Like, he is one of the best receiving backs in the NFL. And this line, it is baffling. I mean, it is one of the hardest places to play in football. But I mean, in the COVID season where there's no fans, 3 points, I guess Devontae Adams. I mean, Devontae Adams could be that important to the Packers offense on the road against a Saints defense that played extremely poorly in week 2. But I mean, the Saints defense is not that bad. They're not going to get 45 penalties called on them again. I don't necessarily question the Saints being 3-point favorites at home, but I do question them being 3-point favorites at home with the 52.5 over under. Cause like, hey, I just have a hard time seeing the path to that this week with potentially both the alpha receivers being out. And my one thought on Drew Brees, I mean, I tweeted multiple times Monday evening trashing Drew Brees' arm strength. And it was a little difficult to notice with, the Ducks that he still averaged over 8 yards per attempt and still had a 300-yard game, and that maybe there's still a path to some fantasy numbers for Drew Brees, because they're going to have to pass a lot this week against the Green Bay Packers. And but yeah, a kind of a strange game where I'm not surprised that there's like a questionable line on this, because there's just so many variables and moving parts for this game.
I couldn't believe people were so infatuated with Drew Brees' arm when it's looked like that the past 2 years.
Well, Mike, I've seen a few people tweet that. Well, what I'll say is, it looked bad, especially last year. I mean, this looks an order of magnitude more concerning than even last year did to me. Like Drew Brees, it was kind of obviously no secret that the arm strength was diminishing, but I feel like it's gone down another level this year where it's getting almost to like the final season Peyton level.
I think the most surprising part of Monday night for me was Traquan Smith being involved over Jared Cook and Emmanuel Sanders. I'm not losing faith in those players just yet. I still think Jared Cook's a tight end 1 this week. But if Traquan Smith's target share holds with all those players active, then we start getting concerned.
Maybe Vegas just knows that Jameis Winston's going to start this game.
I do like the Saints -3, by the way. Not as much as I like Matt Patricia, but I do like the Saints -3.
Is this ours this week, Dick?
Yeah, this is more fair. This is fun. Not like you taking the Cardinals. This is fun.
All right.
Lunch bet, Josh. To get my stakes back.
Packers get 3, correct?
Virtual shake. Let's do it.
There we go. All right. Let's close it out with Monday Night Football, the Kansas City Chiefs, Baltimore Ravens. Oh my goodness. Aren't we so lucky? 54 total in this one. Ravens at home, 3.5-point favorites. Hayden, what's going to happen?
I misspoke earlier. The other game was the game of Sunday. This is the game of not of the week, but of the year. These are the 2 best teams in the NFL for my money. We're finally going to see the Baltimore Ravens receivers, Marquise Brown. You have all the running backs. You have Mark Andrews specifically. These guys are actually going to be able to play a full complement of snaps. They've just been blowing people out of the water, and that's kind of limited them in their fantasy production. I think we're going to see all systems go. Mark Andrews is going to have a ceiling game. Marquise Brown could have a ceiling game. Lamar Jackson went off against the Chiefs last time they played. He had like 22 fantasy points without even throwing a touchdown. He looks much better. He looks poised. He's throwing with touch. I mean, we're just going to see explosion or explosive play after explosive play after explosive play. This is going to be the game of the year.
Yeah, so weird thing, Lamar Jackson maybe had actually his worst game of the year last year against the Chiefs. It was on the road. So much has changed since then, but that'll be, I'm not saying at all I expect it to carry over, just like an interesting nugget. And it's just weird too, like in a week with a 56 over under, that it's not this game. I mean, I think we understand it because the Ravens defense is so good. The Chiefs defense thought kind of had an underrated pass defense last year, but they seem like they're taking on water kind of in the pass defense this year too. The Chiefs, we're kind of seeing like a more traditional Andy Reid defense again. We're just like lots of confusion, lots of underachievement from the Chiefs defense. So that'll be something to watch. And I mean, just finally, Marquise Brown, getting to play in the second half will make me very, very happy as a fantasy football player, because last week it made me very, very sad. And, hopefully maybe we actually get an idea of who leads this Ravens backfield this week, because it's just been extremely difficult to read into these RB touches. I mean, and 2 back-to-back blowouts for your lead running back to have under 10 carries both games. If Mark Ingram's the lead running back is weird, but maybe they're just, keeping the reps off in a long season. So This will be the first week I think we're truly telling running back usage from the Ravens.
And the key is the Chiefs' rushing defense against this Baltimore backfield. The Chiefs through the first 2 weeks, 118 yards against the lifeless Texans on the ground, and then 183 yards last week to the Chargers. So can they stop Ingram, who I think will still lead in touches, and Dobbins, who I think will be more involved? The time will tell.
I love getting Miles Boykin involved last week too. I mean, that's a little extra player that the Ravens have that they have yet to unleash. I never do this. Can we go around the horn here and pick this game? I think that, it's the game of the year, like Hayden said. I would love to get your opinions on it. And Pat, I'm going to start with you.
To me, I think the Chiefs are still the AFC favorite, but even when there's no fans, I'm going to go very old school football analyst. This game being in Baltimore, I feel like does just tip it to the Ravens. And there's zero question. I mean, the Ravens they're the team hitting on all cylinders already. Like they have hit the ground running, whereas the Chiefs, not only has the defense been very questionable, and Patrick Mahomes really kind of 3 sleepy halves until the second half against the Chargers. And, like late last season, he had trouble kind of heating up his connection with Tyreek Hill, and that was carrying over until finally hitting a big play in the second half against the Chargers. So the game is in Baltimore. The Ravens, have they had a single weakness be exposed through the first 2 weeks? Definitely going with the Ravens.
Hayden?
Give me the Ravens. I think that the Chiefs can end up being better long-term, but right now the Ravens look awesome, and they haven't had to travel to LA and then all the way to Baltimore and on short notice here. So I think that the Ravens are going to win this one by like a touchdown.
Daigle?
Not only am I picking the Ravens, I'm pointing to the corner of Evan Silva's attic, and I'm calling my shot. And I'm saying Miles Boykin will be the cover image of the Week 4 waiver wire.
Ooh,
wow.
I like it.
I thought you might be pointing at the WrestleMania sign, Daigle. Like that was
pointing
your
at the cobwebs over there, actually.
I guess I have to take the Chiefs if you guys, I was going to take the Ravens, but I guess I have to take the Chiefs. I'm a little nervous because, Hayden, our guy Sammy Watkins is most likely going to miss this game.
That's a big difference.
I mean, it is a big difference. And, now Mecole Hardman is going to probably get starting reps, and we'll see how much Mecole Hardman can do with those starting reps. But the pieces that the Ravens have added, and Calais Campbell definitely in the middle, and possibly, it's so tough to keep this Chiefs offense down for 4 quarters. And that's exactly what you have to do, because we know Patrick Mahomes can put up 21 points in a single quarter. But if there is a complete team in the NFL, it's absolutely the Baltimore Ravens. So I guess it's a clean sweep. It's a clean sweep. All 4 of us are going with the Ravens. I mean, Pat, they were like one of the best regular season teams of all time last year. And then like in a single elimination playoff game, that's when they lost. But like their regular season performance, especially after that, first loss to the Browns, was unbelievable.
Yeah, I feel like that has already been memory hold. They were genuinely one of the greatest regular season teams in history last year, and have looked even better in weeks 1 and 2.
And Lamar only looks even more comfortable, Daigle.
And Marcus Peters hasn't allowed 100-yard receivers since he was traded to the Baltimore.
Hey, don't forget revenge game too.
Oh yes,
yeah. So,
I those years had already been eliminated from my brain. All right. Speaking of, let's get out of here before we forget anything else. I want to thank all of you for joining us. We will be back on Sunday morning, Rotoworld Live, brought to you by Applebee's, served by Applebee's. Yes, we'll be on Periscope, Twitch, YouTube, on NBC Sports, all that good stuff. Be there, noon Eastern. Get in your questions. We are there for 45 minutes to help you set your perfect lineups. And we'll be back for that Sunday night recap show, game by game, from all the blurbers who covered those contests. So for John Daigle, for Patrick Daugherty, for Hayden Winks, I am Josh Norris, up the villa. Talk to you soon. See ya.